So this is the last session, last cluster of sessions of the day. We've got 3 great presentations. The first one is 2020, the year of distance ed. Moving online is not equal to the increased tech competency, is not equal to increased tech competency instruction. And it's going to be a video we'll be showing, but the speakers are here to answer questions afterwards. And that's Kathleen Brown of Charleston School of Law and Jessica Perio Wittman of University of Connecticut Law School. So go ahead and roll tape.
All for joining us today for
2020, the year of distance ed. Moving online does not equal increased tech competency instruction.
I am Kathleen Katie Brown from the Charleston School of Law.
And I am Jessica Perio Wittman from UConn Law School.
Note that this session is going to be focused on the data side of this particular topic.
The data is compiled from a variety of sources, including surveys we conducted, and we're in the process of writing a few articles based on this data. This year has been unprecedented. As of March 18, 2020, we had 100% of law schools completely online using Zoom, WebEx, Teams, and other online platforms. This experience has provided new skills for our current law students, but is it adding the tech skills that will help them become a tech competent lawyer today and in the future?
To answer this question, we're going to look at tech competency in general, legal tech data, and then the gaps that we need to address for the future of tech competency. So we all know ABA Rule 1.1 as well as Comment 8 that are address tech competency for practicing attorneys. And that Robert Ambrogi does a great job of keeping current list of state bars with tech competency, and that we're currently sitting at 39 states. Now, there is also a whole bunch of vendors and resources that are out there and available for practicing attorneys so they can continue to stay tech competent. And even some law schools have adopted using some of these tools within their own system.
Before we look at the data, we also need to recognize that there are a number of models for what a competent lawyer should look like. We originally thought competency simply meant a deep understanding of legal knowledge and traditional skills, with a secondary focus on soft skills and business knowledge. With the T-shaped lawyer model, we expand our focus on generic business, leadership, and soft skills to include design thinking, project management, process improvement, risk management, and technology, to name a few. Client expectations for lawyers have evolved with the rapid change of technology and its impact on business. The Delta model reinforces the necessity to balance the practice, the process, and the people. Here, tech competency becomes crucial in the process, as we rely on technology to ensure the delivery of effective and efficient legal services. In the UK, Dan Kane has coined the term the O-shaped lawyer as a new model to ensure effective legal services. The opportunistic nature of the O-shaped lawyer fosters innovation and highlights technology competency. But no matter which model you're looking at, law firms and legal departments are looking for the full package. Firms and legal departments are hiring holistic problem solvers who know how and when to leverage technology. Here are a number of other characteristics that law firms and legal departments are looking for in their new hires.
In 2017, a review of law firm websites completed by Daniel Lina Jr. and Jordan Galvin identified the value of innovation in law firms by cataloging legal service delivery innovations. For example, a law firm working with a legal startup where it was identified if they had moved beyond that testing phase and they were actually offering the product to the clients, then it would be included. So this allowed for them to consistently capture innovation in the form of legal technology, analytics, and process. Now, we recognize that there are a group of law schools that are going to be out there that Jessica and I have actually been referring to as the 100% committers. And so these schools are actually going to have required intensive legal technology programs, and they often result in specialization certificates, degrees at the JD, Masters, LLM, JSD, and SJD levels. And these pool of schools really do bring a wealth of legal tech competent folks into the profession, which is really great. But we were also interested in seeing what everyone else is doing at their institution and establishing if the training that's being provided is actually resulting in a Delta or O model lawyer in legal tech.
So looking back at Lina and Galvin's work, they also mined law school websites in 2017 and 2019 for prototype legal service delivery innovation and technology programs offered at law schools. In reviewing the data, we quickly see the business of law is a staple at most schools, and that there were very few schools teaching in the prototype areas of process improvement and project management.
In 2017, I first conducted an informal legal technology survey where I asked law library directors to share feedback on the legal technology instruction that's being provided at their school. In 2020, we resent the survey to see if there had been instructional changes after just 3 years in both the formal and informal. Both surveys provided a dearth of information about the formal and informal legal technology instruction. And for this presentation, we've actually decided to focus more on the formal for credit instruction, but we did think that you might be interested in this informal instruction data point.
Now, focusing on the for-credit legal technology class offerings, we do see a shift from 44% of schools offering a legal tech class in 2017 to 58% offering a legal tech class in 2020. We also see an interesting shift in who is now providing the for-credit legal tech courses. In particular, we see an increase in the number of librarians teaching these courses, from 21% in 2017 to 46% just 3 years later.
Question 8 of both surveys address the following legal technology topics being taught in these for-credit legal technology courses.
Earlier, I mentioned that a vast majority of schools included business of law prototypes in their tech curriculum. According to the Law School Innovation Index results, this number came to 97%. When we cross-reference this Innovation Index data from 2017 to the results in our surveys, we find that legal tech courses are primarily covering these business of law prototype topics in their classes, much more so than in doctrinal courses.
And aligning the data from our 2017 and our 2020 surveys with statements from practicing attorneys about legal technology and tech competency today, we find that law schools' formal instruction is very much in line with what we would all think of as traditional tech competency.
We also find that legal tech instruction has improved over the years, building in other legal tech innovations, such as artificial intelligence, that clients have come to expect to improve their outcomes.
When we move into more of the specialized areas of legal technology, like coding or web development, this is where we begin to see a reduction of instruction in those areas of tech competency expected by hiring managers and practicing attorneys for legal technology competency today.
And unfortunately, based on the data, we seem to be dropping the ball on graduating law students who meet the model for a modern legal tech competent attorney. Here, we see a significant reduction in key areas of formal instruction that are creating gaps in our students' legal tech knowledge. There is some relief, however, as our surveys indicate that some of these gaps are being filled by doctrinal courses where specific tech skills are presented over the duration of the class. For example, access to justice.
Now let's apply our survey data set to a specific set of tech skills identified by attorneys as a requirement to be a proficient litigator today?
So we see that litigators need skills in courtroom technology, decision support systems, matter and knowledge management, as well as project management. While we see an increase in teaching courtroom technology and matter and knowledge management in legal tech courses versus doctrinal courses, we also see a decrease in teaching decision support systems in both legal tech and doctrinal courses.
E-discovery is also a crucial set of skills a litigator to for a litigator to possess. And we find that 80% of schools that participated in our study have taught e-discovery over the past 5 years, with 55% of e-discovery taught as a standalone course, 35% teaching e-discovery as a topic in another course, and 9% are actually covering the topic of e-discovery in both standalone courses and a separate course. So what does all of this mean?
Law firms, legal departments, and practicing attorneys all agree that when evaluating professionals for open legal positions, the candidate's technical skills matter, particularly in the areas of cybersecurity and data analytics, such as decision support systems, legal tech startups, and new model law firms. And none of these skills were taught effectively to our students in traditional classrooms, much less in online classrooms.
In our upcoming articles, we plan on covering these statistics and gaps in more detail, and we hope to work with groups like CALI to identify how we can continue to improve legal technology education for graduates that meet the needs of the current legal environment. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either Jessica or I, and thank you very much.
Right when she finished, I had a cough. Thank God for mute. All right, thank you very much. We'll take questions afterwards, but if you do have questions and don't want to forget them, put them into Q&A. Our next speaker / video is the Legal Research Institute, Law Library of Congress, Educational Offerings in a Time of COVID-19 by Barbara Bavis of the Law Library of Congress. Always good to have the LLOC come visit us. So Tobias, roll tape.
Hi, I'm Barbara Bavis. I'm the Bibliographic and Research Instruction Librarian for the Law Library of Congress, and I'm going to introduce you to the distance learning initiatives we offer through our Legal Research Institute. Our Legal Research Institute on law.gov is where we advertise our in-person and webinar-based class offerings for U.S. as well as foreign and comparative law topics. The Institute was launched in early 2020, and the timing proved fortunate because in March, the library's campus was closed to the public due to the pandemic. So thanks to the vision of the late Law Librarian of Congress, Jane Sanchez, we were in a good position to not only continue our instructional offerings, but actually increase our attendance via our new webinars. For this CALI session, we would like to discuss how we developed these webinars, which webinars we offer, and how the webinars allowed us to respond to and even grow our audience while the library campus was closed due to the pandemic. Let me first talk about the webinars we offer. We currently provide 4 webinar series to the public. The first is the Foreign and Comparative Law series of webinars. One thing that many people do not know about the Law Library of Congress is that we have a wealth of expertise in foreign, international, and comparative law. We have foreign legal specialists from around the world who are attorneys in their native jurisdictions, and many of them also have a law degree from institutions in the United States. The foreign legal specialists cover over 240 jurisdictions around the world. Their assignments are often divided up by language. For example, a French-speaking specialist might not only cover France, but also former French colonies in Africa. The foreign legal specialists write reports for Congress, and many of those reports are available on our website, law.gov. The reports typically take an issue, such as the regulation of cryptocurrency, and discuss how that issue is regulated in countries around the world. The Foreign and Comparative Law webinar series of classes is designed to leverage the expertise of our legal specialists and shine some light on the foreign, comparative, and international law issues that have been the subject of research at the Law Library of Congress. Our specialists have provided webinars on a diverse array of topics, from various jurisdictions' responses to COVID to the regulation of artificial intelligence. Here's a highlight from one of our Foreign and Comparative Law webinars.
So, along with the administration of justice, another central function of government is law enforcement. This brings us to the topic of predictive policing. Jenny, would you explain what that means, please?
Certainly, Nicholas, thank you. So we used a definition that we found in an article in the National Institute for Justice Journal from 2010. And it defines predictive policing as taking data from disparate sources, analyzing them, and then using the results to anticipate, prevent, and respond more effectively to future crime. What I found was interesting, that article was from 2010, and it said it was titled Predictive Policing, the Future of Law Enforcement. So it's already a while ago. So it has been around for quite a while. And it does not replace the traditional policing methods, but it's just supposed to make policing more effective. And generally, it's subdivided into two things. One is location-based predictive policing, and then we have person-based predictive policing. So location-based predictive policing is supposed to predict a heightened probability of crime occurring in a certain area and at a certain time. And then we have the person-based predictive policing, so that predicts the probability of an individual committing a certain crime or being the victim of a crime. And you might have heard of as an example, you might have heard of the strategic subject list that was used by the Chicago police. And that was a program that was supported by a federal grant, and it ended in November 2019 when the grant ran out. There was an algorithm, the algorithm created a risk assessment score, which then reflected an individual's probability of being involved in a shooting incident, either as a victim or an offender. So each individual had a score from 0 to 500. 500 was a very high probability, and they were ranked using 8 attributes, not including race and sex, and most of them were from arrests in the police database. So what also should be pointed out is that the statistical methods that are used for predictive policing have a wide range. So they range from basic methods, so for example, logistic regression, to approaches using machine learning or neural networks, deep learning, what I talked about at the beginning when we talked about the definition. So there are some basic ones and some very advanced ones.
The next webinar series we offer focuses on U.S. law. The legal reference specialists from our Public Services Division primarily answer questions from Congress and the public on U.S. law. The Orientation to Legal Research series of webinars that they provide reflects on the content of the in-person series of classes that we offered before the pandemic, and which are designed to give a basic introduction to legal sources and research techniques. These orientations, taught by legal reference librarians, are typically offered once a month on a rotating basis. The classes we offer in this series cover 3 major topics. First, U.S. case law. This entry in the series provides an overview of U.S. case law research, including information about the U.S. federal court system, the publication of court opinions, methods for researching case law, and information about locating records and briefs. Second, U.S. federal statutes. This entry in the series provides an overview of U.S. statutory and legislative research, including information about how to find and use the U.S. Code, the U.S. statutes at large, and U.S. federal bills and resolutions. And finally, tracing federal regulations. This entry in the series provides an overview of U.S. federal regulations, including information about the notice and comment rulemaking process, the publication and citation of regulations, and the tracing of regulations from the Code of Federal Regulations to the proposed rule in the Federal Register, to, finally, the regulations docket. I should also mention that we offer a webinar called Orientation to Law Library Collections. The Orientation to Law Library Collections webinar is designed for patrons who are familiar with legal research and would instead prefer an introduction to the collections and services specific to the Law Library of Congress. This webinar is an online version of the 1-hour on-site orientations taught by legal reference librarians from the Law Library of Congress, and will cover digital resources available through the Law Library's website, as well as those available on-site. Since the library is currently closed to the public, we have been placing a special emphasis on law library resources that are accessible online. Here's a highlight from one of our Orientation to Legal Research webinars.
This class focuses on the law coming from our legislative branch, coming from Congress. I'll just briefly mention that the other classes in this series focus on law coming from the other two branches. And if you're interested in taking all three branches, they kind of fit together. Just visit our website where you probably signed up for this class, law.gov, and use a link for the Legal Institute. So we're going to come back to this graphic a couple of different times during the lecture. And each time we'll be introducing a new phase of our discussion. So right now you see a broad overview of the three-part publication process from the time a law is enacted, or what's referred to as an enrolled bill, to the time it's inserted into the U.S. Code. So we'll discuss all these parts individually during the class, starting with the code, probably because it's the most familiar, and then working backwards. So we start at the top, and then we're going to go all the way down to enrolled bill.
The next webinar offering I want to mention is our Lunch and Learn webinar series. Our Lunch and Learn webinar series takes a deep dive into the Law Library's unique collections. The topics of these webinars range from how to use our new Foreign Legal Gazette database to locate foreign legal gazettes, how to conduct research in the United States serial set, and even a webinar where remote interns shared the unique items they discovered in our collection of historical Spanish legal documents from the 15th to 19th centuries. Here's a highlight from our latest Lunch and Learn webinar.
All right, so my first document is on a royal order issued by King Carlos III to create free schools for girls. They're called poor girls in the Kingdom of Spain. This particular document is mostly focused on a neighborhood of Madrid, and it's a little patronizing. It says that the goal of these free schools is to bring these girls from the lower class of this neighborhood into, quote, the respectable class. So they were instructed for 8 hours a day. So they had 4 hours in the morning, took a break, and then they came back again 4 hours later. So it's an intense school day. They were instructed in the basics of the Catholic faith, the rules of good homemaking, how to be good wives and mothers, and the exercise of good virtues. I don't know what that explicitly is. They didn't have to learn how to read and write, and that's explicitly stated in the document. However, the teachers had the obligation to teach them how to read and write if they asked. So that makes me wonder how many of them asked, yes, I'd like to read and write. So above all, the goal was to teach them how to be good future homemakers, because this endeavor was described as, quote, very necessary and useful for the state, for the good of the public, and for the motherland. So this was an attempt to bring these quote unquote poor girls up into some kind of respectable, again, whatever that means, respectable level or social class, so that when they went on to marry and have children, they would be good mothers and create good citizens. So it reminded me of Republican motherhood that we learn about here in the US.
Last but not least, we offer a Congress.gov webinar every other month. Congress.gov is the official legislative information system for the United States Congress. This orientation is designed to give a basic overview of Congress.gov, and while the focus of the webinar is searching legislation and the congressional member information attached to the legislation, we also highlight the new features of Congress.gov. Here is a clip of a recent Congress.gov webinar.
All right, so let's actually look at the bill we were talking about, the For the People Act of 2019, House Bill 1. All right, so each bill summary and status page, which is what we call this page here, looks generally like this for bills and resolutions. It's going to have an overview box that gives you kind of at-a-glance information about the sponsor, the committees that have dealt with this bill, if there's any committee meetings, if they've created any reports, and then the latest action to be taken on the bill, or that all of those are typically in that overview box. We also like to include a tracker. This tracker is at a glance, how far has this bill gotten in Congress? If there's still an arrow at the end of the highlighted box, that means the bill is still live, and it will be alive until the end of this Congress. If you're dealing with a bill from a prior Congress, it will typically have a line at whatever the last event to happen to that bill is in the tracker. One other thing I like to note while we're still up here at the top of the page is often people ask us for the Congressional Budget Office cost estimates, so what a bill is going to possibly cost in the future if it's to pass. If you click on that link, you can select the CBO reports, and you'll be taken to the CBO's page to see that. All right, I'm going to scroll down. The first tab you're going to see is the Summary tab. And the Summary tab is full of summaries created by the Congressional Research Service. They go through and they give you just kind of short summaries of each bill in each version of the bill as it moves through Congress. So if there's major changes to a bill, they're going to create a new summary. To select the summary you want, you just click the arrow for the drop-down menu and select the version you'd like.
I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for considering this proposal, and please do not hesitate to visit the Law Library of Congress online at www.law.gov. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Barbara. So if you have questions, be sure to put them in the Q&A. We'll rack them and stack them for when we have the question and answer period. Barbara is here with us. And our last presentation is the gratitude, motivation, connection, and how discussion boards can encourage both for your students. Our speaker, our video was created by Michelle Hunt of Ohio Northern University College of Law. And roll tape.
Hello, I'm Cheli Hunt from ONU Law, and I'm excited to share with you a few ideas for how to use discussion boards to encourage the gratitude, motivation, connection for your students, whether your course is in person or online. But first, in keeping with the theme of CALIcon, here are my 3 wishes for legal education in the 2020s. May you preserve and maintain the additional creativity, resiliency, and connections you cultivated during this time. This project developed out of witnessing my 3L students begin to panic as the transition to online learning moved from temporary to permanent during their last semester of law school. As time went along, students felt less and less in control of their studies and their lives. The goal was to help them realize they had control over the most important part of their situation, their reaction. Thus began my research to find ways to help students flip the locus of control back to an internal regulation and regain their motivation to finish their legal education and to prepare for a bar exam that had become a moving target for weeks and then months. Even if students did not have control over the timing or formatting of their bar exam, there were still parts of life and studying they could choose to appreciate. Yes, things may be different, but their ability to find gratitude would guide them through. When you ask most people, they will define gratitude as being grateful for the good things in life. Indeed, gratitude is recognition that we have received something of value from someone else, but there is much more to gratitude than just being grateful. What many may not realize is that even though gratitude is foundational to our well-being, gratitude is not an automatic response to life's events. Instead, it is a virtue or moral emotion that must be taught and practiced for it to become habit. Now you know why some people seem to show gratitude so easily. They learn to do it, which means it is a skill that all of us can learn. Gratitude has another superpower too, the power to motivate us to achieve goals, which is where the research became really exciting. According to a recent study, students can improve positive emotions towards studying with gratitude. This study refuted previous beliefs that gratitude promoted complacency and instead suggests that gratitude can be helpful in improving motivation. I realized this was exactly what my students needed, not just for a bar exam during a pandemic, but at every stage of their legal education and beyond. Thus began my journey to create a supplemental program to help students embrace gratitude to improve their motivation based on self-determination theory. According to self-determination theory, individuals are more intrinsically motivated when their needs for competence, relatedness, and autonomy are met. In other words, for students to be intrinsically motivated, most will need to feel in control of their goals, to believe they have the skills needed to succeed, and to feel connected to others. I regularly began asking my students what was motivating them to keep studying for the bar exam, and I kept track of where each fell on the motivation scale, whether they were extrinsically motivated, introjectedly motivated, identifiedly motivated, or intrinsically motivated. Not surprisingly, many were externally motivated, and at the same unmotivated by fear of the unknown. They felt isolated and like everything around them was beyond their control. A few of them found themselves on the introjected level, which was almost worse because in addition to feeling a loss of control over their future, they had self-inflicted wounds of guilt and shame if they took long breaks from bar prep, slept more than usual, ate junk food, binge-watched shows, or simply did not feel like studying. While the global pandemic and transition to online learning were making students feel more and more like any goals they had were forced upon them by the law school, their jurisdiction, and current events, my focus was on helping them to reframe their goals so they could feel more in control of their journey and ultimately could create paths to achieve their goals that were motivated by their internal desire to succeed, which is where gratitude comes in. Not in the preachy, you've got to look at the silver lining or ignore all the bad things way. That's just annoying. No, gratitude as in the who made you laugh recently? What is something you really enjoy doing? And what went well for you this week questions. Through these experiences and in working with the faculty learning community at Ohio Northern on motivation and technology, I realized I could take the work I was doing with bar students last spring, summer, and fall to create a supplemental gratitude program for all students at every level of their legal education by using discussion boards. I know, discussion boards. I had to laugh when a friend at another university reacted to my idea to create a gratitude program using discussion boards with another lame discussion board idea, Cheli. Believe me, no one avoids traditional discussion boards the way I do. You know the old write one original substantive post and reply to 2 of your classmates assignment? You may be thinking, oh man, I do that. And that's okay. It's a start. But let me tell you why this is a dreadful assignment for students. First, it requires students to wait on other students to complete their assignments too, even if you impose a midweek deadline for the first post. If you are like me, and your students probably are, they won't wait for others. You'll post an assignment, they'll reply to any two that are on the board, and then move on, never to return again. And what was learned there? Second, students will respond to any two, maybe shorter posts, maybe friends posts, and then where do you have authenticity of interaction? And you may be thinking that the answer to this is to assign who they will respond to, but this actually causes an even worse authenticity problem because you just took away the only perceived control the students had in this assignment, the ability to choose who to reply to. Third, you have to be able to grade these inauthentic discussions, and that probably does not excite you. So let's pack away these traditional approaches to discussion boards and move upward. Discussion boards can be useful when they are student-focused and not so much content-driven. Maybe the best idea is to begin by asking yourself why you are using a discussion board instead of another activity. If your goal is to facilitate communication between and among students and their instructors, and to generate new ideas and spark interest in the subject, then the discussion board can be an excellent choice. Some ideas for student-focused discussion boards include encouraging student introductions with creative questions like, what is your breakout song when you pass the bar? Or by posting 5 pictures that represent them. Brainstorming research paper or project topics for the course. Providing topic, question, and answer sections that allow students to answer each other's questions. Using student-led and moderated discussions on topics related to the course, like a current event affecting the area of study. Allowing forums that support students on topics that interest them and are possibly unrelated to your course. Or designing supplemental modules that infuse your course with topics that foster student well-being, which is where the Gratitude program resides. The program, Gratitude, Motivation, Enlightenments. Notice I use the word enlightenments instead of the word assignment. In my course, I avoid the word assignment whenever possible. In fact, I have all but stricken that word from my classroom vocabulary. By its very nature, an assignment exists beyond an individual's control. It is something that they are told to do, have to do, and will be judged for doing, and that's a motivation killer. If you replace assignment with the word activity, enlightenment, or another more positive word, you'll see a change in motivation for your students. For my Gratitude program, I modified 3 activities inspired by research conducted by John Mark Freuland: a gratitude letter, intrinsic learning goals, and a gratitude journal. These enlightenments can be used individually or together in any course. But before we go into how to use the discussion boards with the Gratitude program, let me give a little word of caution about discussion board etiquette. When using any kind of discussion boards, but especially ones that ask students to be open and potentially vulnerable about their feelings, motivations, and goals, it's very important to set ground rules for interacting with each other, including clear do's and don'ts related to privacy, copying, and bullying. You can find many examples of discussion board etiquette policies by doing a quick internet search for discussion board etiquette. Best practices include requiring students to read and acknowledge the rules for discussion board etiquette prior to participating in the forums. Beginning with the gratitude letter. The gratitude letter is as much about the person writing the letter as it is about the person receiving it. In fact, this person may be the same person. The purpose is to find gratitude where it may have been missed and properly thank that person. This can drum up some uncomfortable feelings, especially if the student has difficulty thinking of someone to write to or if that person has passed away. Be mindful of these possibilities and encourage the student to consider what ways they have not been grateful to themselves, or to think about a total stranger who has helped in some way and they were unable to thank that person at the time. There is no right or wrong way to write the letter. It only needs to be written and does not ever have to be delivered. For purposes of the program, it is the answers to the reflection questions that are shared with the class that are especially important to helping with building community, generating more gratitude, and increasing motivation. Our university uses Moodle for its learning management system, and the next few slides will focus on that program. However, every learning management system has features that can be used to set up similarly styled discussion boards. Basically, you will add a new forum and choose the option that allows each person to post one discussion. Always remember to include the reflection questions in the description of the forum and bold any specific requirements such as word count or expected number of responses to others. Next, the Intrinsic Learning Goals activity is one that I plan to use for every course I teach. This activity also can be modified to include intrinsic life goals. Students begin the course with stating 2 or 3 goals they want to achieve by the end of the course and explaining their motivation for choosing those goals and how they will hold themselves accountable. Each week, students respond to their original post to update their goal progress, celebrate goal accomplishments, and add additional goals for the semester. Other students will respond by providing encouragement and offering additional insights or resources. Setting up the Intrinsic Goals Forum is similar to the Gratitude Letter Forum, except it is very important that you provide clear instructions on your expectations for creating the original post, updating that post, and providing responses and encouragement to other students in the course. Lastly, the Gratitude Journal. Although the Gratitude Journal uses a discussion board, it is personal to the student and only available to the student and the instructor. The Gratitude Journal is a place where the student shares with the instructor one positive event each week for which the student is thankful. The student then describes how he or she contributed to that positive event. The instructor interacts with the student on a regular basis set by the instructor or as requested by the student. This does not need to be a weekly interaction, although for some students, weekly interaction may be beneficial. The forum setup is different because you will need to restrict access only to the student. If your LMS uses a release code, choose a code that cannot be guessed or easily discovered by other students. In addition to the inspiration generated by my students, this program idea was inspired by 2 research articles. Both articles include additional information about motivation and additional ideas for course activities to foster motivation and well-being in students through gratitude. Thank you for your kind attention, and please feel free to contact me with questions or comments about this program.
Hey, whoops. There we go. All right, so that was a watch party. We did have a question. Will Kelly be posting the slides? Of course we will. We'll be plugging the speakers for their slides to post on the conference website. Here's a question for Jessica and Kathleen. Have you seen any difference in the adoption of legal tech classes based on US News ranking? Are the more prestigious schools doing less, or are they doing more?
So first I want to say thank you for that question, because actually Jessica and I immediately started texting each other and saying, hey, why didn't we actually cross-reference our spreadsheet for rankings? So thank you, because we're definitely going to be doing that. But what I will say is the original survey that we talked about, that was anonymous. And so there were some people who chose to let us know what school they were at, but it wasn't something where we mined that data for that information. But what we did first was we actually, the research fellows at my school went through the list of the ABA accredited schools and looked at it more from a consumer point of view. So somebody who was going to the website and mining it for tech competency or legal tech courses, legal tech degrees. And so that's how we kind of pulled that data. So we got one level of information about the ABA accredited schools that way. And it's going to be super easy for us to then drop in the rankings and be able to pull that information. But I want Jessica to talk a little bit about real quick, her research assistants then mined that data even more and looked at it from a different point of view.
Yeah, so thank you, Katie. So what I had my RAs do is that I had them take that first spreadsheet that Katie's RAs worked on, and I had them look at it from the lens of the Lina and the Galvin report. So, all of the things that we had posted in our slide about question 8, all the different categories of what legal tech actually meant. The students went back and, looked at all of these course descriptions to see, are these categories fitting within, these course descriptions? And what we found was really interesting was that when Katie's students looked at it at the first shot, they automatically thought, a large majority of these classes don't, or a large majority of these schools don't offer, tech training in the ways that we expect. They wouldn't have been able to find out that tech training was being taught at all, either through, the course name or through the course description, which is another tidbit of information we plan to write about. We did find, however, that the 100% committers always stay the same. But to go back to the original question, are more prestigious schools doing less? So I was looking back at the first spreadsheet that Katie had been referring to, and I looked at the top 5 US News and World Report law schools. So that's Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, and University of Chicago. And for the most part, they do a little bit, but not a lot. I want to say that Stanford probably does the most. Harvard, offers a tech track, at least from what our students could see, but they couldn't find a legal tech class. Yale and University of Chicago don't offer anything according to what our students found. But I think that as we, have them mine more information and we factor in what the ranking is, we'll be able to find a little bit more of a refined result and be able to add that into our article. So thank you, whoever asked us that question.
Well, tech competency is one of those terms of art that's pretty elastic, like access to justice or innovation. It becomes defined by what people want it to be defined by. And so what people might refer to or call, tech competency training isn't the same thing as what, actually, it's hard to tell. I think the ABA guidelines were sufficiently broad to allow lots of things to be tossed into that bucket. And for God's sakes, this is a moving target. I mean, the tech is constantly changing depending on what area of law you're going to practice in. You do or don't need certain tech competencies. Although there's got to be a baseline, right, of things every lawyer should know, maybe things every human should know, right?
And really, that's kind of what we're trying to figure out with our data. And one other thing, actually, that Jessica and I were texting about a little bit was, you can only find so much on the website, right? And so that's where we need to start digging into syllabuses and what is actually being offered. And so that's where, we mentioned at the end of our presentation, potentially working with Cali on things. So don't be surprised if you start reaching out to say, hey, we want to start looking at some of these tech syllabi to mine them and figuring out what we can do to create a base of what everybody should at least be offering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've certainly poked at the idea and kind of backed off slowly because of the complexity of it, or at least the mushiness of it all, I guess. Anyhow, I wanted to ask Barbara also, speaking of baselines, I imagine the audience for a lot of the LLOC webinars is lawyers, because they look like, well, although that's not necessarily true, right?
It's a pretty good mix, actually. We have anything from,
pro se people to you know, I see a couple people on the attendees list that have come to a couple of our webinars. So it's a wide range of attendees. And we kind of have to thread the needle a little bit there to make sure we're not, you know, we're covering things that beginners can need to move forward, but we're not, you know, wasting anyone's time either.
Well, good. I don't want to thread the needle. I'm going to stick a crowbar into that and ask you. I mean, it would be one of the. I mean, we do a lot of work in access to justice, and that means self-represented litigants, pro se. And it's if you think, oh, I can go to the LLC website and learn all about the law. But I imagine, can the public request topics for webinars? Do you feel like you've got an access to justice or a what's the word? Enlighten the public about law mission with some of these?
Definitely. And I think that's why we focused on kind of the three branches of government, because not only do we serve the three branches of government, but we also think that that's kind of a good delineation for a good place for people to start. We actually have a survey that we give at the end of every webinar. And one of the questions in that survey is, are there any other legal topics you would like us to cover in a future webinar? Because we want to know what people are looking for. We get a little bit of that from our questions, from our Ask a Librarian questions that are, you know, through our website. You can ask us questions. But I find that we get a lot more clearer answers to that question if we put it in our survey at the end of the webinars. So, and we've gotten a couple, in fact, we just did one on legislative history research because we had people that kept asking us, when are you going to do a legislative history webinar? So
you don't get a lot of my neighbor's tree is over on my property. Can I chop it off? You know,
we get some of that.
I need to get a divorce in whatever state, random state that I'm in, and can you help me with that?
We get some of that. We definitely do. And what we try to do, instead of having a class that's geared towards something specific like that, is we try to do LibGuides or research guides on those topics and kind of push people toward those topics. And then if there's a theme that comes out of that, like people really want us to do neighbor law, for instance, you know, laws about that, then we'll look at creating one. So we've definitely created ones in the past based on feedback.
And I imagine you struggle with the fact that you're part of the federal government, and
Yes.
state-specific information is extremely hard to gather and do a 50-state comparative or something like that.
We definitely do. So we try to give people kind of the tools to find their state laws while teaching them kind of the federal side of things. Yeah.
Got it. Why can't the laws be the same every says John, the only non-lawyer on this, probably on this entire presentation. Michelle, I had a question for Michelle. Cheli, how do you know? How do you know if it's working?
So that's a really great question, and one that we're diving into this coming fall with a class that is being designed for different research objectives. And one of them is to test this. And there is actually a gratitude instrument that has been developed that we're planning to administer at the beginning of the semester and then again at the end of the semester in fall, to be able to do a comparison, to be able to get more quantitative data on that. But, you know, from a qualitative standpoint, the students, you know, respond and say whether or not it's working. So it's more of a subjective report on whether or not they feel more motivated by the end of the semester than they did at the beginning of the semester, or if they're just genuinely feeling happier and feel that there's an overall improvement in their general well-being.
Where do you get your students? Are they self-selecting? Are they required if they're struggling? Are they walking, you know, whoever walks in the door asking for academic support or something like that?
So that's a great question. They are actually self-selecting for this, and I'm happy to report for the course that is coming up in fall 2021, a little over a third of the 2L class has signed up for this course voluntarily.
And it's not credit either.
It is credit. It's a 1 credit hour course, and it looks into, this is just one component of it. The gratitude program, as I said in the presentation, is kind of supplementing. The other focus is kind of bridging the gap between what they've learned in substantive law as 1Ls and what they're preparing to do for the bar exam as 3Ls and recent graduates.
Very good. Thank you. Got a question for Jessica and Kate. How do you think law schools should teach the use of analytics for legal decision making? Does this belong in a legal tech class, a legal research class, or some kind of doctrine class? Maybe a clinic?
I'm going to answer yes to all of those. I'm not going to let Jessica sort of mine it out of that. But
I mean, we kind of heard it from, Michael Murphy's presentation earlier, right? We heard all of his students talk about how they really like the different exposure in all different types of classes. We already know that there's an influx of librarians who are teaching both legal tech, as well as legal research. So we can kind of anticipate that, analytics anecdotally are being taught in both of those different types of classes, especially if a librarian is teaching a class. But we found that, our students, are really looking for that overall exposure, so for example, here at UConn, our advanced legal research courses or even our legal tech classes are restricted to only 18 students because we have curves. And so, if a student somehow doesn't get into that class, where else would they be able to get those type of skills? And they would be able to get in a doctrinal class or in a clinic.
One thing that I would mention is no matter what class it's in, being taught in, I would recommend that you have a correlation where you talk about analytics and AI in connection with ethics. That's the way that we do it at our school, both with our 1Ls in the research class and in the advanced classes of research and technology. And we found that works really well because it makes them think about those next questions, right? We're not just relying on what we get, the data, the numbers. We're also thinking about what is my duty as an attorney with processing and making decisions based on that data.
Very good, very good. All right, it is 5:59 and I'm determined to end on time. Thank you all very much for your videos and for sticking around to answer questions. If there's other questions, your contact information is in the things, and we'll be, of course, posting the videos and the slides. We'll be bugging you about the slides later. So folks, that's the end of the first